Hello, and welcome to our orientation for newly arrived Afghans, presented by Journey's End Refugee Services and the New York State Office for New Americans. My name is Kevin Roman, and I am a staff attorney for Journey's End Refugee Services. As an immigration lawyer, it is my job to assist individuals like you in immigration-related matters. Today I'm going to cover a lot of important information, including your immigration status, American laws that you need to follow, and other immigration issues that may come up. The first thing I'm going to talk about is immigration status. All of you should fall into one of three categories: special immigrant visa holders, SIV parolees, and humanitarian parolees. Humanitarian parolees are also referred to as just parolees. It's very important to know what your immigration category is. These categories are legally distinct, and your specific category will determine what you need to do next in order to stay in the United States and hopefully receive a green card. While many of you have submitted paperwork and applications for a special immigrant visa or the SIV program, without an approved application, you are not in SIV status, and you are likely here on parole status. This is important because as a parolee, you are not guaranteed a special immigrant visa or a green card, and you will likely need to take additional steps beyond the special immigrant visa process to ensure that you and your family are able to stay in the United States. Again, determining your correct immigration status is very important. Next, we will look at several different immigration documents and how to identify your status on these documents. If you enter the United States with a special immigrant visa, shown here, you are already a permanent resident. This means you will receive a green card and that you have permanent status in the United States. If you are an SIV, you will have a visa in your passport, and the category will be indicated as SQ or SI under visa category. It is located on the right side of the visa and indicated in the picture shown. SIV recipients will have their green cards mailed to them. In the meantime, the visa itself will serve as a temporary green card. It is so important to fill out the form AR11 to update your address whenever you move. This way the government has your correct address and is able to send your green card to you. The address on file with the government will be where your documents, including your green card, will be mailed. If the address is incorrect, you will not receive your documents. If you do not have a visa as shown on this slide, then you are not a permanent resident and you don't have permanent status in the United States. You are likely here on parole, and you will need to take additional steps in order for you and your family to remain in the United States. In a small number of cases, individuals with special immigrant visas did not receive a visa in their passport. Instead, they received a stamp in their passport indicating SI or SQ status. Examples of those stamps are shown here. If you applied for a special immigrant visa and received Chief of Mission approval, but have not received approval of your I-360, then you may be in an SI-SQ parolee status. SI and SQ parolees do not have permanent status in the United States and will need to take additional steps to obtain their green card. If you do not fall under either of the previously mentioned categories, you fall under humanitarian parole. Most individuals listening to this presentation are here on parole. Parole status is not permanent, and you'll need to take additional steps for you and your family to remain in the United States and possibly receive a green card. Individuals on parole status will have a stamp in their passport indicating parole. If you do not have a passport, your parole status will be indicated on your I-94 with the letters OAR, OAW, or DT. Parolees should have certain documentation given to them either upon entrance to the United States or at the military base where you stayed. This includes Form I-94, the arrival departure record, and a pending Form I-765, application for employment authorization. On this slide, you'll see an example of an I-94. Your I-94 is accessible online using the website indicated on this slide. On this I-94, you can see the letters OAR next to class of admission, indicating that this individual is here on parole status. Some individuals may have received a paper I-94. An example of a paper I-94 is shown on this slide. If you received a paper I-94, it is important that you keep it safe. These documents are fragile and they damage easily, and they are also very difficult to replace. Now that we've determined your status, we're going to take a further look at what parole actually means. Parole is discretionary, meaning the government can strip you of your parole status if you do not continue to meet the conditions of parole. They can also strip you of parole status if you commit crimes here in the United States. Additionally, parole is temporary. Most Afghans paroled into the United States were granted 2 years of parole status, after which the parole status will expire. Within those 2 years, you will have an opportunity to possibly receive a more permanent status and possibly get a green card. For individuals here on parole status, there are several options in which to obtain a more permanent status, one of which is asylum, and the other is through a family reunification process. The specifics of these processes will be covered in a separate presentation. In order to maintain your parole status, you have certain responsibilities. Again, parole is discretionary, and if you do not keep up with these responsibilities, the government may strip you of parole status. Most importantly, you must follow all American laws while here in the United States. Later in the presentation, we'll talk more about the important laws in America that you need to know. In addition to following the law, you will need to get all your required vaccinations. Additionally, you are required to update your address with the government every time you move. As we discussed previously, you may update your address with the government by filing a Form AR-11. This form can be found online at the USCIS website. If you are here on SIV status, you are already a permanent resident. However, you still must follow the same rules as a parolee. You must follow the law, get your vaccinations, and update your address every time you move. On this slide, you'll see the vaccination requirements to remain in the United States and keep your immigration status. Many of you may have already received these vaccines at the military base where you stayed. Others will need to contact your local health clinic or speak with your case manager to make sure that you have all the vaccines that are required. We're now going to talk about some of the important laws in the United States that you need to be aware of. If you break the law or are arrested for any reason, you risk losing your immigration status and face other serious consequences, including jail and possibly being deported from the United States. Not knowing the law is not an excuse for violating the law, so please pay attention as I talk about the different criminal laws that you need to know. One important law that you should know is that only citizens can vote in the United States, and only citizens can register to vote in the United States. If you are here on parole status, or even if you have your green card already, you are not allowed to vote or register to vote. If you are not a U.S. citizen and you vote or register to vote in a U.S. election, then you could face serious consequences, including the loss of your immigration status. The U.S. has many other laws governing behavior, including laws about domestic violence, welfare fraud, prostitution, disputes over money, and drugs and alcohol. For example, in the United States, you have to be 21 years or older to legally drink alcohol. Additionally, drinking and driving or driving under the influence of alcohol or any other drug is a serious offense in the United States. If you are arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol or any other drugs, you could be imprisoned and lose your immigration status. The United States has many laws concerning domestic violence and domestic abuse. This includes violence and abuse against any person living in your home with you, whether they are a spouse, child, or even just a roommate. Domestic violence laws make it illegal to physically abuse people in your household. You cannot punch, kick, slap, push, or otherwise strike people living in your household. It is also illegal to sexually abuse people in your household. You cannot force anybody else to engage in any sexual acts with you, even your spouse. To engage in any sexual activity with any person in the United States, even your wife or your husband, you must have that person's consent. You cannot force them into sexual activity. Other domestic violence laws in the United States make it illegal for you to emotionally, verbally, or psychologically abuse other members of your household. Even yelling and screaming or threatening members of your household is considered a form of domestic violence and can have serious consequences. Your family members have rights. If you do anything described in the previous slide, you could be arrested, convicted of a crime, and deported. Additionally, your spouse has rights. It is illegal to prevent your spouse from attending school or looking for a job. You cannot prevent your wife or your husband from pursuing an education or employment. Another important set of laws that you must follow have to do with child abuse and neglect. You must provide your child with the basic necessities that they need to survive, including food, shelter, and clothing. Additionally, you must provide your children with an education and medical treatment. If your children are old enough to attend school, then it is your responsibility as a parent to ensure that they are attending school. If your child is injured or sick, then it is your responsibility to ensure that they see a doctor or go to a hospital and receive any necessary medical treatment. Also, as we discussed previously, you cannot physically or sexually abuse your child in any manner. Lastly, if your child is under the age of 12, they should not be left alone for long periods of time. You must find an adult to supervise your child if you are going to be away. Continuing our conversation on child abuse and neglect, it is important to understand that certain types of professionals are mandated reporters. This means that they are required by law to report any suspected child abuse or neglect to government authorities. Professionals who are considered mandated reporters include doctors, teachers, and social workers. Again, if your child has signs of child abuse or neglect, these types of professionals are required by law to report that to the authorities. Child abuse is taken very seriously in the United States. If you abuse your child, you may be reported to Child Protective Services, or CPS. If you are visited by CPS and you do not speak English, you should request an interpreter. CPS may visit your home and assess the conditions in which your child is living. If CPS determines that the conditions at your home are not suitable for children, or if they find other signs of abuse or neglect, there may be serious consequences. CPS can remove the child from the home and take the child out of your custody, either temporarily or even permanently. In cases of severe abuse and neglect, you may face criminal charges and jail time. You could even be deported. As important as it is to follow the law, you should also remember that while you're in the United States, you have rights. And you have these rights regardless of your immigration status. If you're ever stopped by the police, or if the police come to your home and you do not speak English, the first thing you should do is request an interpreter. If you are arrested, you have the right to an attorney, and you should request the help of an attorney as soon as possible. If you are in criminal court, the government will provide you an attorney if you cannot afford one. If you are in immigration court, you have the right to an attorney, however, you must pay for it yourself. In certain cases, you may be able to access an attorney for free, but we recommend that you try to save money in case you ever need to hire an attorney. Marijuana, also known as hash, hashish, weed, pot, or kush, is illegal to use, possess, buy, sell, or even give away. Any involvement in marijuana or hashish may have serious immigration consequences. As an immigration lawyer, my simple advice when it comes to marijuana or hashish is just don't have any involvement in it at all. Some people may tell you that marijuana is legal in New York State, And while that might be true, marijuana is still illegal on the federal level. Since immigration law is also in the jurisdiction of the federal government, involvement with marijuana by immigrants may have serious consequences. If immigration authorities find that you have used or been involved in marijuana in any way, it could prevent you from obtaining citizenship, being approved for a green card, and it could even have more serious consequences like jail or deportation. This is true even for immigrants who possess a medical marijuana card. You should also be aware that the federal government and immigration authorities may check your social media pages, like Facebook, Instagram, and even TikTok. Any social media photos, videos, or posts showing or suggesting the use of marijuana or other illegal drugs or any illegal activity of any kind could get you in trouble. So please be cautious when posting information on social media, and more importantly, please follow the law. The next thing that we are going to talk about are the different identity documents that you will have here in the United States. Each identity document is unique and serves a different purpose. Each identity document is important, and you must be cautious not to lose any of your identity documents, as they can be difficult to replace. The specific documents that I will be covering are the Form I-94, a U.S. Social Security card, the New York State ID or driver's license, and the Employment Authorization Card, sometimes referred to as a work card or work permit. This slide shows a picture of a Social Security card. Social Security cards are paper and can be fragile, so store them in a safe place. The Social Security card and Social Security number are necessary for employment purposes, to receive certain government benefits, and for tax purposes. On this slide, you'll see an example of a New York State ID card. The ID card comes in 3 different versions. There is a card that is strictly for identification purposes. There is also the learner permit, which is necessary to begin driving in the United States before you get your driver's license. And lastly, there is the driver's license. In order to drive, you need to have either a driver license or a learner permit. Please do not drive unless you have one of these 2 documents. If you have questions on how to obtain a learner permit or driver license, please ask your case manager. This next slide shows an example of an employment authorization document, also called an EAD. You also may hear it referred to as the employment card, a work card, or work permit. These are all unofficial names for the employment authorization document. As the name suggests, this card is important for employment purposes. It also serves as a form of federal ID for immigration purposes and is useful evidence of valid immigration status. The employment authorization document also has your A number on it, also called your USCIS number. This 9-digit identification number is extremely important for immigration purposes, and you will need it anytime you are completing immigration documents or seeking immigration services. This next slide shows an example of a lawful permanent resident card, also known as the green card. At this time, most of you will not have a green card yet. If you are approved for a green card in the future, you must carry it with you at all times. The green card serves as proof that you are a lawful permanent resident here in the United States, and also serves as proof that you are authorized for employment in the United States. Whether or not you are eligible to apply for a green card at this time is a complicated topic and will not be covered here in this presentation. At the end of this presentation, we will provide you with information on how you can make an appointment with an immigration attorney at Journey's End Refugee Services so you can learn more about your immigration status and whether or not you are eligible to apply for a green card. As I mentioned earlier, all of these identity documents are extremely important, and you should be careful not to lose them because many of them are difficult to replace. We also suggest that you make copies of all your identity documents. While a copy is not the same and will not replace an identity document, it will help in replacing an identity document should you happen to lose one. Many of you, if not all of you, still have family in Afghanistan, and I'm sure you're all wondering if you can bring your family members here to the United States. This is a very complicated question, and the answer will depend on your individual circumstances. However, I can tell you that right now, unfortunately, there are not many good options for you to bring family from Afghanistan. U.S. immigration law is very restrictive, and it only allows for specific family members in specific situations to be able to come to the United States. For example, in order for you to petition to bring your parents to the United States, you must be a U.S. citizen. If you only have a green card, it is not possible for you to petition to bring your parents to the United States. You must be a citizen. This is just one example of how restrictive the U.S. immigration system can be. In addition to restrictive U.S. immigration laws, there are other barriers that are specific to Afghanistan. For example, there is no operational U.S. embassy in Afghanistan at this time. If you want to know more about family reunification, you will need to make an appointment with an immigration attorney. Again, at the end of this presentation, we will give you information on how you can make an appointment with an immigration attorney at Journey's End. Some of you may have questions about U.S. citizenship. Generally, you need to have a green card for at least 5 years before you can apply for citizenship. In order to obtain citizenship, you will need to pass an English test. The English test requires you to speak and understand English, and it also requires you to be able to read and write in English. If you do not already know English, it is important that you start learning English now, so when the time comes, you can be approved for citizenship. Citizenship comes with many benefits, and it is an important step for immigrants who plan to live permanently in the United States. If you want to know more information about U.S. citizenship, you'll need to make an appointment with an immigration attorney. If you need assistance in learning English, the Journey's End Education Department offers free English classes. If you are interested in English classes, please contact the Journey's End Education Department. If you are here as a parolee, but you worked on behalf of the U.S. government or its allies, you may still be eligible for a special immigrant visa. To be eligible for a special immigrant visa, you must be an Afghan national who was employed by or on behalf of the United States government for at least 1 year or more. This is referred to as qualifying employment. You will also need 2 letters from your qualifying employment. The first letter is a recommendation letter from your supervisor, and you will also need a letter from the Human Resources Department at your employer verifying the length of your employment. Once you have this required documentation, you can begin the special immigrant visa process. However, there are several more steps after this that you will need to complete before you can be approved for a special immigrant visa. For more detailed information on the special immigrant visa process, or for help applying for a special immigrant visa, you will need to make an appointment with an immigration attorney. I'm sure many of you still have questions. The Journey's End Legal Department will be scheduling several question and answer sessions. Please attend a question and answer session, and we will try to answer as many of your questions as possible. If you wish to schedule an appointment with a Journey's End immigration attorney, please call 716-882-4963, extension 203. Once again, that number is 716-882-4963, extension 203. When you call this number, you must leave a message. Please include your name, your phone number, and if you do not speak English, the language that you speak, so we can return your phone call. Again, you must call this number in order to get an appointment with an immigration attorney at Journey's End, and you must leave a message. We will call you back to schedule the appointment. Your case manager cannot schedule an appointment with the Journey's End Legal Department for you, so if you need to speak to an immigration lawyer, please call this number, leave a message, and we will return your call to schedule you for an appointment. This presentation was brought to you in part by the New York State Office for New Americans. If you wish to contact the Office for New Americans, you may call the phone number listed on this slide. The Journey's End Legal Department has 3 locations in New York State: Western New York, Southern Tier, and the Finger Lakes region. If you wish to contact any of our offices, you may do so using the information on this slide.